Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam Number 6. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. A data engineer attempts to use AWS Glue interactive sessions in SageMaker Studio, but is denied access despite having a SageMaker IAM role with trust policies for both SageMaker and Glue. How can the data engineer resolve this issue? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The AWS Glue Session User Restricted Service Role Managed policy grants the specific permissions required to create, manage, and interact with AWS Glue interactive sessions, including access to the Glue data catalog and session-related API calls. Attaching this policy to the SageMaker execution role enables SageMaker Studio to create and run Glue interactive sessions on the data engineer's behalf. The Amazon SageMaker Full Access policy grants broad permissions across all SageMaker service actions, but does not include the Glue interactive session permissions needed to create and manage sessions from within Studio. AWS Glue Service Role grants the permissions that Glue needs to access other AWS services when running ETL jobs. Attaching it to an IAM user rather than the SageMaker execution role addresses the wrong principle and the wrong set of permissions for this use case. The SDS Assume Role permission enables a principal to assume an IAM role, but is not specifically related to the interactive session creation permissions that are missing. The SageMaker Association permission is used for associating resources within SageMaker, not for enabling Glue interactive session access. Question 2. Fabricam Logistics is building a near real-time analytics dashboard using Amazon Redshift serverless. The company ingests order tracking events from Amazon Kinesis data streams and needs sub-minute data freshness in the dashboard without using intermediate S3 staging. A data engineer must design the ingestion pipeline with the least operational overhead. Which approach should the data engineer take? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Redshift streaming ingestion allows data to flow directly from Kinesis data streams into a Redshift materialized view without any intermediate S3 staging, providing sub-minute data freshness with minimal operational overhead. The auto refresh option ensures the materialized view is continuously updated as new data arrives. Amazon Data Firehose with Redshift as destination actually stages data through S3 first using the copy command, adding latency and an intermediate storage layer. Lambda executing insert statements against Redshift is inefficient for high-volume streaming data and creates connection management challenges. Glue Spark streaming with JDBC adds operational complexity and does not eliminate intermediate processing. Question 3. Adatum Corp operates an Amazon MSK cluster with SASL/IAM authentication for their streaming data platform. A new data engineering team in a partner account needs to consume from specific Kafka topics. The MSK cluster uses Karaft mode with TLS encryption in transit. The partner team's Flink application must authenticate using their own AWS account credentials. Which combination of steps enables secure cross-account access to the MSK cluster? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option D. For cross-account MSK access with SASL/IAM authentication, the partner account's principals must assume an IAM role in the MSK cluster account that has the necessary Kafka permissions. Creating an IAM role with a cross-account trust policy allows the partner team's Flink application to authenticate using their own credentials through role assumption. MSK Multi-VPC Private Connectivity enables secure network access from the partner account's VPC to the MSK cluster without requiring VPC peering or transit gateway, creating a managed connection that simplifies networking. Configuring SASL/SCRAM would require switching authentication methods, and when SASL/IAM is used, ACLs have no effect, making SCRAM credentials unnecessary. Simply allowing inbound traffic via security groups does not provide authentication or the necessary network path for cross-account connectivity. Mutual TLS is a different authentication mechanism that would require reconfiguring the existing SASL/IAM setup. Question 4. Fabricam Education is building a serverless data pipeline where an AWS Lambda function processes records from an Amazon SQS queue. The Lambda function takes up to 90 seconds to process each batch. During testing, some messages are being processed multiple times. What is the most likely cause and solution? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. When Lambda processes SQS messages, if the visibility timeout is shorter than the function's processing time, messages become visible in the queue again before the Lambda function finishes processing them, causing duplicate processing. AWS recommends setting the visibility timeout to at least 6 times the Lambda function timeout plus the maximum batching window in seconds value. For a 90-second function timeout, the visibility timeout should be at least 540 seconds. Low reserved concurrency would cause throttling, not duplicate processing. Lambda uses event source mapping, polling for SQS integration, not synchronous or asynchronous invocation patterns. While switching to FIFO would provide exactly once delivery, the root cause is the visibility timeout misconfiguration, which should be fixed regardless of queue type. Question 5. Fabricam Telecom uses Amazon Athena to analyze call detail records stored as CSV files in Amazon S3. The monthly Athena bill has grown to $15,000. Analysis shows that the dataset is 3 TB of CSV data queried extensively by the analytics team. The data engineer needs to reduce Athena costs by at least 90% without changing the query patterns. Which combination of actions achieves this goal? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Converting CSV to Parquet typically reduces file sizes by 75–90% due to columnar storage and built-in compression, which directly reduces Athena costs since Athena charges $5 per TB scanned. Parquet also enables column pruning, so queries only scan the columns they reference. Partitioning by commonly filtered date columns further reduces scanned data by skipping irrelevant partitions entirely. Together, these optimizations can reduce costs by 90% or more. Redshift Spectrum is not necessarily cheaper and adds operational complexity. While Athena result caching reduces costs for identical repeated queries, it does not address the fundamental issue of scanning large CSV datasets. gzip compression of CSV reduces file size but does not enable column pruning, so queries still scan all columns even when only a few are needed. Question 6. Litware Telecommunications stores call detail records, CDRs, in Amazon DynamoDB. Each record has a TTL attribute set to expire after 90 days. The compliance team reports that some expired records are still appearing in query results several hours after their TTL timestamps have passed. The data engineer needs to explain this behavior and implement a solution that ensures expired records are excluded from application queries. What should the data engineer do? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. DynamoDB TTL deletions are eventually consistent and can take up to 48 hours after the expiry timestamp to physically remove items. During this window, expired items may still appear in read operations. Adding a filter expression that checks the TTL attribute against the current epoch time ensures that expired items are excluded from query results even before they are physically deleted. Increasing write capacity units does not affect TTL deletion speed because TTL deletions are a background process that does not consume provisioned WCUs. DynamoDB streams capture TTL deletions after they occur, but cannot force immediate deletion of items that haven't been processed yet. Replacing TTL with manual batch deletes adds significant operational complexity and WCU costs, while TTL deletions are free. Question 7. Northwind Enterprises has a multi-account AWS environment with a central data lake account and 3 business unit accounts. The data lake stores sensitive employee data in Amazon S3, cataloged in the AWS Glue Data Catalog. The data governance team wants to grant each business unit access to only the tables relevant to their department using a scalable, tag-based approach managed through AWS Lake Formation. Which combination of steps should the data engineer perform? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option C. LFDAGs provide tag-based access control, TBAC, in lake formation, which is the recommended approach for large-scale data lakes with multiple accounts. Creating LFDAGs with department key-value pairs and assigning them to catalog resources establishes the classification framework. Granting permissions using LFDAG expressions allows automatic permission resolution based on matching tags, which scales efficiently as new tables are added since they inherit tags from their parent database. IAM policies specifying exact table ARNts do not scale and bypass Lake Formation's governance model. Named resource method requires individual grants per resource per principal, which is operationally complex for large environments. Creating separate data catalog copies violates the single source of truth principle and creates significant maintenance overhead. Question 8. Adatum Financial processes stock trade data using Amazon Managed Service for Apache Flink. The application uses event time processing with 10-minute tumbling windows to calculate trade volume aggregates. Due to network delays, some trade events arrive up to 3 minutes late. The business requires that late events are still included in the correct windows aggregation, but events arriving more than 3 minutes late should be routed to a separate side output for manual review. The application must also survive restarts without losing processing state. Which combination of Flink configurations should the data engineer implement? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option C. Configuring watermarks with a 3-minute bounded out-of-orderness strategy tells Flink to wait for events that are up to 3 minutes late before closing a window, ensuring late events are included in the correct window aggregation. Events arriving after the watermark has passed can be directed to a side output for manual review. Enabling application snapshots preserves the complete processing state, including window contents and watermark positions, allowing the application to resume from the exact state after a restart without data loss. Processing time windows ignore event timestamps entirely, which means trade events would be assigned to windows based on when they arrive rather than when the trade occurred, producing inaccurate aggregations. Increasing stream retention does not help Flink handle late arriving events within its windowing logic. Using allowed lateness with a trigger is a valid Flink concept, but is redundant when watermarks are already configured with the appropriate bounded out-of-orderness, and firing on each late element produces duplicate outputs rather than clean side output routing. Question 9. A data engineer at Litware Corp is building a step functions workflow to process customer order files uploaded to S3. Each file is a CSV containing between 500 and 500,000 order records. The workflow must invoke a Lambda function to validate each record against business rules and write valid records to DynamoDB. The engineer needs the solution to handle the largest files efficiently with high parallelism. Which step functions configuration should the engineer use? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. correct answer is option B. The distributed map state is purpose-built for processing large-scale datasets stored in S3. It natively reads CSV and JSON files from S3 using an item reader configuration, distributes items across up to 10,000 parallel child workflow executions, and each child execution maintains its own separate execution history. This makes it ideal for processing 500,000 records efficiently. The inline map state supports a maximum concurrency of 40 concurrent iterations and shares execution history with the parent workflow, which is capped at 25,000 entries. For 500,000 records, the parent workflow would far exceed the 25,000 execution history entry limit, causing the workflow to fail. Additionally, the inline map requires input as a JSON array passed from a previous state rather than reading S3 files directly. The parallel state requires a fixed number of branches defined at design time and cannot dynamically scale to variable record counts. A choice state provides conditional branching logic but does not enable parallel processing of dataset items. Question 10. Fabricam Analytics runs Amazon EMR clusters to process large-scale genomics data. The data engineer needs to minimize costs while maintaining cluster stability for Spark jobs that run for 4-6 hours. Some jobs are fault-tolerant while others cannot tolerate task node failures. Which EMR cluster configuration optimizes cost while meeting these requirements? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The primary node manages cluster coordination and must never be interrupted, so on-demand is required. Core nodes store HDFS data, and losing them causes data loss, so on-demand ensures stability. Task nodes only run processing tasks without storing HDFS data, making them ideal for spot instances, since their loss only means tasks are retried, not data loss. Instance fleets allow specifying multiple instance types to increase spot capacity availability. Using spot for all nodes risks cluster failure if the primary or core nodes are reclaimed, which violates the stability requirement. Reserved instances provide cost savings for long-running workloads, but are a billing construct, not an EMR node configuration. They apply automatically to matching instances. Graviton instances reduce per-instance cost, but on-demand for all nodes does not provide the significant cost savings that spot instances offer for task nodes. Question 11. Northwind Energy runs Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL as its primary transactional database. The application team reports that AWS Lambda functions frequently exhaust the database connection pool during peak traffic, causing connection timeout errors. Which solution addresses this issue with the least code changes? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Amazon RDS Proxy provides connection pooling and multiplexing that is specifically designed to handle the connection pattern created by Lambda functions. Lambda functions open and close database connections rapidly as they scale up, which can exhaust the connection pool. RDS Proxy maintains a warm pool of reusable connections, reducing connection overhead by up to 66% and providing faster failover. The Lambda functions only need to change the database endpoint to point to the proxy, requiring minimal code changes. Increasing max connections to extremely high values degrades database performance because each PostgreSQL connection consumes memory and CPU resources. Replacing Aurora with DynamoDB requires a complete application rewrite since the data model and query patterns for relational and NoSQL databases are fundamentally different. Limiting Lambda reserved concurrency artificially restricts the application's ability to scale and may cause request failures during peak traffic. Question 12. Tailspin Analytics runs Athena queries on a 50 TB data lake stored in Amazon S3. The data is partitioned by year, month, and day with over 100,000 partitions. Analysts report that queries take 30-60 seconds just to plan before execution begins due to partition metadata lookups in the Glue data catalog. Which solution will reduce query planning time with the least operational overhead? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Partition projection defines partition schemes directly in Athena table properties, eliminating the need for getPartition API calls to the Glue data catalog entirely. Instead of querying the catalog for partition metadata, Athena calculates the partition locations based on the projection configuration, which dramatically reduces query planning time for tables with large numbers of partitions. This is configured through table properties and requires no infrastructure changes. Replacing the Glue data catalog with a self-managed Hive metastore on EMR introduces significant operational overhead for cluster management and does not guarantee faster metadata access. Reducing partitions from year/month/day to year/month would reduce partition count, but would scan more data per query since daily filtering would no longer prune partitions, potentially increasing both query time and cost. Partition indexes in the Glue data catalog improve partition pruning performance, but still require API calls to the catalog and do not eliminate the metadata lookup overhead as effectively as partition projection. Question 13. Northwind Insurance uses Amazon Athena to query claims data stored in Amazon S3. The data is partitioned by year, month, and day. The Glue data catalog currently contains 50,000 partitions, and Athena queries that filter by date spend significant time on partition resolution through getPartition API calls. The data engineer needs to reduce query planning time. What should the data engineer do? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Partition projection eliminates getPartition API calls entirely by defining the partition scheme, types, ranges, formats, and intervals directly in the Athena table properties. Athena calculates partition values in memory rather than querying the Glue data catalog, which dramatically reduces query planning time for tables with tens of thousands of partitions. Partition indexes in the Glue data catalog can improve partition pruning performance but still require API calls to the catalog, making them less effective than partition projection for very high partition counts. Rewriting all data into a single non-partitioned file would force Athena to scan the entire dataset for every query, dramatically increasing both cost and query time. Increasing the query timeout does not address the root cause of slow partition resolution and wastes compute time on catalog operations. Question 14. A data engineer at Adatum Technologies is building an ETL pipeline using AWS Glue. The source data in S3 contains a column that sometimes appears as a string and sometimes as an integer across different files. The Glue dynamic frame detects this as an ambiguous type. The engineer needs to cast all values to string type. Which dynamic frame transformation should be used? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Resolve choice is specifically designed to handle ambiguous or conflicting data types in dynamic frames. Using the cast string action resolves the choice type by casting all values to string, regardless of whether the original value was a string or integer. Apply mapping can rename and cast columns, but is not the appropriate transformation for resolving choice types. It works on columns with already determined types. Relationalize flattens nested structures into relational tables, but does not resolve type ambiguities. Filter would remove records rather than converting them, resulting in data loss. Question 15. Tailspin Toys uses Amazon Data Firehose to ingest IoT sensor data and deliver it to Amazon S3. The team wants to convert the incoming JSON data to Apache Parquet format for cost-efficient querying with Amazon Athena. The data must be partitioned in S3 by device type and event date, which are fields within the JSON payload. Which configuration should the data engineer apply to the Firehose stream? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Amazon Data Firehose natively supports format conversion from JSON to Parquet or ORC using a schema defined in the Glue data catalog. Dynamic partitioning uses JQ expressions or Lambda to extract partition keys from within the record payload, enabling automatic creation of S3 prefixes like device type equals sensor/event date equals 2025-1-15. This is the most operationally efficient approach. Lambda transformation functions cannot convert to Parquet format since they return records back to Firehose for delivery. S3 object tagging does not create partitioned S3 prefix structures required for Athena. A separate Glue ETL job adds operational complexity, additional latency, and cost compared to native Firehose capabilities. Question 16. Contoso Healthcare runs an Amazon EMR cluster for processing medical imaging data. The cluster runs long-running Spark jobs that take 6 minutes 8 hours to complete. The data engineering team wants to reduce compute costs by 60% while ensuring that no in-progress jobs fail due to instance terminations. The cluster currently uses all on-demand instances across primary, core, and task node groups. Which configuration should the data engineer implement? Select 1, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Keeping primary and core nodes as on-demand while converting task nodes to spot instances provides significant cost savings without risking job failures. Task nodes only process data and do not store HDFS data, so their termination does not cause data loss. Instance fleets with multiple instance types increase the likelihood of spot capacity availability. Yarn node labels ensure application masters run only on core nodes, so spot termination of task nodes does not kill the application master and fail the job. Converting all nodes to spot risks primary node termination, which would end the entire cluster, and core node termination causes HDFS data loss. Converting core nodes to spot even with EMRFS still risks losing in-progress shuffle data and intermediate results. EMR serverless is suitable for batch workloads, but may not support all the custom configurations and libraries needed for medical imaging processing, and the question asks about cost optimization of the existing cluster. Question 17. A startup has a Salesforce SaaS application and needs to continuously send encrypted data to its Amazon Redshift data warehouse with the least operational overhead. The company must retain full control over its encryption keys. Which solution meets these requirements? Select 1 answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Amazon AppFlow is a fully managed integration service that natively connects SaaS applications like Salesforce to AWS services, including Redshift, without requiring custom development. The run-on event trigger initiates the flow automatically in response to changes in Salesforce, satisfying the continuous delivery requirement. Customer-managed KMS keys give the company complete control over encryption, including the ability to set key rotation policies and audit key usage. MWAA can send data from Salesforce to Redshift, but requires significant configuration and ongoing management to maintain the end-to-end connection. And AWS managed keys do not provide customer-controlled encryption. AWS Glue workflows are designed for ETL orchestration between AWS data sources and are not purpose-built for SaaS integration. Redshift UDFs execute logic on individual rows within SQL queries and cannot orchestrate continuous data flows from external SaaS applications. Question 18. A data engineering team uses Amazon Athena for ad hoc querying and Amazon EMR for big data processing. Processed data is stored in S3 and then queried by Athena. The team is experiencing high latency in EMR data processing. No configuration issues were found in the cluster. What is the most likely root cause? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. When an EMR cluster reads or writes data to an S3 bucket in a different region, all data transfer crosses regional boundaries, incurring both latency penalties and cross-region data transfer fees. AWS recommends launching EMR clusters in the same region as the S3 buckets containing input and output data to avoid this overhead. The Athena query execution limit affects Athena query performance, not EMR processing latency. The location of Athena relative to EMR has no direct impact on EMR job execution, since Athena operates independently after EMR writes results to S3. The data format stored in S3 affects Athena query efficiency, but does not cause EMR processing latency, which occurs before any Athena query is run. Question 19. A data media has an Amazon Kinesis data stream with 10 shards processing video metadata events. 5 different consumer applications need to read from the same stream simultaneously. Each consumer is experiencing high read latency and frequent provision throughput exceeded exception errors. What should the data engineer do to resolve this issue? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. Enhanced Fanout provides each registered consumer with a dedicated 2 MB/s read throughput per shard via HTTP/2 push using the Subscribe to Shard API. With 5 shared consumers on the standard shared throughput model, each shard's 2 MB/s read capacity is divided among all consumers, resulting in only 400 KB/s per consumer and causing provision throughput exceeded exception errors due to the 5 read transactions per second per shard limit. Enhanced Fanout supports up to 20 registered consumers, each with independent throughput, and reduces latency from approximately 200 ms to 70 ms. Increasing shards to 50 increases aggregate throughput, but does not solve the per shard consumer contention problem, since all 5 consumers still share each shard's read capacity. Combining consumers into a single KCL application does not reduce the number of read operations needed. Switching to Firehose eliminates the real-time processing capability and does not support multiple independent consumer applications. Question 20. A data engineer at Fabricam Payments is migrating a 500 GB PostgreSQL database from Amazon RDS to Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL using AWS DMS. The database contains several tables with large object lob columns storing PDF documents averaging 5 MB each. The migration must complete within a 4-hour maintenance window. Which DMS lob handling configuration should the data engineer use to optimize migration speed? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Inline lob mode provides the best performance for this scenario because it handles lobs inline with the row data up to the specified size limit. Lobs that fit within the inline size, 5 MB covers the average document size, are transferred without the additional lookup required in full lob mode, significantly improving throughput. Lobs exceeding the inline limit fall back to full lob mode processing. Full lob mode transfers lobs individually using a lookup mechanism for each lob value, which is the slowest option and may not complete within the 4-hour window for a 500 GB database. Limited lob mode truncates lobs exceeding the configured size, which would corrupt PDF documents larger than the limit. While PG dump and PG restore are viable tools, managing a separate parallel migration adds operational complexity and coordination challenges within the maintenance window. That is the end of practice exam number 6. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.